22 disturbing Japanese games, 7 levels. From a Japanese ghost story that got all the streamers screaming, to a game where everybody can die with just one photo. These are the most disturbing Japanese games ever made and released. The deeper into the iceberg we get, the more disturbing and unhinged the games will get. Let's start at the tip of the iceberg. Level 1. The Tairyo Jigoku. The Tairyo Jigoku, which literally translates to the overwhelming hell, is for sure one of the most obscure survival horror games in PlayStation 2 history. Released exclusively in Japan in 2007, the game never got a Western release. Maybe there's a reason for that. The game's premise is actually extremely simple. Our protagonist, Erika, chases a white rabbit that stole her cell phone only to become trapped in dark woods teeming with oversized insects. What follows is a relentless nightmare where escape seems perpetually out of reach. It's Alice in Wonderland, but worse. The whole experience is claustrophobic, as narrow pathways funnel you through environments where the camera angles shift unpredictably, disorienting your sense of direction just like Erika. As soon as you establish your bearings, the perspective changes, insects swarm, and you panic. The insects themselves are constant and overwhelming. Spiders latch on to Erika's body, while mosquitoes and roaches attack in seemingly infinite waves. The panic meter rises rapidly as they surround you, creating a suffocating sense of helplessness that basically never goes away. And the whole time, your weapons are pathetically inadequate. Sure, you get a baseball bat, but it breaks quickly. Your insect repellent provides temporary relief at best because there are too many of them. You can hear the insect chittering coming from all directions, making them sound simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. The game is full of psychological tricks like this, making you believe threats are closer than they appear, or maybe lurking just beyond your vision. Each new area promises some kind of potential escape, but delivers a new set of horrors. You're being toyed with, and you know it, but all you can do is desperately chase the rabbit deeper into increasingly hostile territory. Wonderland doesn't have a happy ending in this case. Sweet Home, 1989. In 1989, Capcom released Sweet Home for the NES, an 8-bit game that manages to overcome its limitations with some impressively graphic horror. The RPG follows 5 documentary filmmakers trapped in Mamiya Mansion, a decaying estate haunted by the vengeful spirit Lady Mamiya. But of course, what begins as a simple documentary shoot quickly transforms into a desperate fight for survival against supernatural forces. The game is built to have an unforgiving permanent death system. When characters die, they're gone forever, their bodies left behind as lifeless sprites on the mansion floor. The game forces you to press on with less resources, creating increasingly suffocating tension with each encounter. Sure, replacement items can be found for the deceased character's unique tools, but the psychological impact of losing team members sticks with you. You're increasingly alone. Oh, and the death animations are shockingly graphic for their era. Female characters splatter to the ground before their bodies are dragged away, leaving bloody smears across the floor. In fact, Nintendo of America refused to localize the game specifically because of these gruesome depictions. The game features floating ghosts, possessed dolls, and decaying corpses that attack without warning, rendered in simple yet effective pixel art that leaves just enough to the imagination. Apparently, that was too much for America to take. Or maybe it was because of the narrative itself, centered around a grieving mother whose child fell into a furnace, sparking a cycle of vengeance claiming countless lives within the mansion's walls. That's definitely pretty dark for a Nintendo game. Sweet Home pioneered techniques later perfected in survival horror games like Resident Evil. Limited inventory, door-opening animations that build suspense, and a constant feeling that safety is merely temporary. The technology might be outdated, but the game still has a pretty impressive impact. Level 2. Fatal Frame 2. Fatal Frame 2 is a giant psychological nightmare centered around twin sisters Mio and Mayu Amakura. While visiting a childhood play spot before it's destroyed by dam construction, Mayu follows mysterious crimson butterflies into an abandoned village lost in time. Suddenly, she finds herself in a desperate fight for survival against vengeful spirits and ancient rituals. Specifically, the Crimson Sacrifice Ritual, a ceremony requiring one twin to strangle the other. The village believes twins are a single soul split at birth, and this ritual reunites them. The strangled twin will become a crimson butterfly guardian while their body is thrown into the hellish abyss to appease it and prevent catastrophe. Players experience this horror through Mio's perspective as she frantically searches for her increasingly possessed sister. Armed only with the Camera Obscura, a specialized camera that exorcises spirits, Mio must confront the village's dark past and the vengeful ghost of Sai Kurosawa. Because it turns out that Sai, the game's primary antagonist, was the final twin meant for sacrifice. When her sister Ye escaped, Sai was hanged alone and thrown into the abyss. This improper ritual triggered the repentance, releasing darkness that consumed the entire village. Now Sai possesses Mayu, seeking to complete the ritual that failed decades ago. And make no mistake, whether or not that happens depends entirely on you. What elevates Fatal Frame 2 beyond typical horror games is the multiple endings which hinge on whether players allow the ritual to continue or fight against it, forcing confrontation with difficult choices about sacrifice, destiny, and the inseparable bond between twins. That means that you have a much bigger stake in the game than just playing it. The character's fates literally depend on you, leaving that weight lingering long after the controller is set down. Nier, Gestalt and Replicant. Nier takes place in a world on the brink of extinction. A mysterious disease called Black Scrawl threatens what remains of humanity, leaving black marks and runes across victims' bodies. In this bleak future, the unnamed protagonist fights to save Yona from this terminal illness. That seems like a pretty simple, if challenging, quest, but as with most Japanese stories, there's a lot more to it. The world you explore isn't what it seems, and the monsters you battle, called Shades, aren't mindless creatures, but conscious beings with thoughts, feelings, and language. They're actually gestalts, the original human souls separated from their bodies through Project Gestalt, a last-ditch effort to preserve humanity during a global catastrophe. And you, the player character? You're nothing more than a replicant, an artificial shell created to eventually house these souls. But something went wrong. Replicants developed consciousness, viewing the true humans as monsters to be eliminated. Now, every shade you cut down brings humanity closer to permanent extinction, and the blood on your hands belongs to the very people you think you're protecting. Yet the game pushes you forward through its multiple playthroughs, each revealing more disturbing truths than the last. In fact, the core of the game's moral dilemma can be summed up in one sentence. You don't need to be evil to kill. You just have to believe you're right. That's exactly what the game is pushing for you. The protagonist isn't malicious. He's just desperate to save someone he loves. His conviction blinds him to the consequences of his actions even when his friends suggest the Shades might be intelligent. The game forces you to revisit areas, replaying scenarios with new knowledge that transforms heroic acts into horrific ones. You witness the destruction of an entire village, cause the demise of young individuals, and ultimately contribute to humanity's downfall, knowing that you had a major hand in making it happen. By the final ending, you face an impossible choice. Sacrifice yourself to save a friend, or eliminate them to end their suffering. No matter what you choose, someone loses everything. The game is reminding you that the tragedy isn't just that terrible things happen, but that they often happen because of good intentions carried out with absolute conviction. And if you'd like to avoid the tragedy of not having anything good to watch on YouTube, you should hit that subscribe button. Easy fix! Now let's move on to the next level. Level 3. Paranoiac, RPG Maker. Paranoiac thrusts players into the fractured psyche of Miki, a young woman returning to her family home after years away. But of course, the house harbors dark memories of her aunt's death, too painful to confront, and Miki's past refuses to stay buried. Her disturbed mental state and perception soon begin to warp reality, as doors lead to impossible places, familiar rooms transform, the whole house becomes some sinister, malevolent enemy. Players experience her deteriorating grip on reality through disorienting camera angles and audio distortions that mimic the confusion of severe psychological breaks. You can never get a true grip on reality in this game. Behind Miki lurks something terrible, a relentless entity that embodies her deepest guilt and trauma. This manifestation stalks her through the house, its appearances growing more frequent as Miki delves deeper into her most suppressed memories. Its gross form reflects the way trauma distorts our perception of ourselves. It's basically one big metaphor of being haunted by our own past. But we have to navigate this nightmare while piecing together what exactly happened in this home years ago. The family photographs have faces scratched out, diaries have pages torn, and cryptic messages scrawled on walls create a disturbing breadcrumb trail. Each revelation brings players closer to understanding what actually shattered this young woman's mind. Paranoiac forces choices that make players complicit in Miki's journey through her personal hell. Do you confront the entity or hide from it? Do you examine disturbing evidence or preserve blissful ignorance? There's no right or wrong answers, no easy escape. It's a simulation of a mental breakdown. You dread it, but you can't outsmart it. When the true nature of the entity is revealed, depending on player choices, they face relief or the most disturbing realization of all, that sometimes the monsters chasing us wear familiar faces, even our own. LSD Dream Emulator. LSD Dream Emulator is a PlayStation title from 1998 that sets out to capture the logic-defying nature of nightmares. Based on developer Hiroko Nishikawa's decade-long dream journal, this Japanese game creates disorientation through simple but effective means. The gameplay follows a first-person perspective with no actual objectives beyond exploration. You begin each day in a random location, wandering through surreal landscapes that follow dream logic, not physical rules. Well, there is one rule. Colliding with any wall or object triggers a linking event, immediately transporting you to an entirely different environment without warning. The screen fades to a color, a noise plays, and suddenly you're somewhere else entirely, and you have to work it out. The environments themselves constantly shift and transform, so if you return to a familiar area, you'll notice textures have changed, sometimes subtly, other times drastically. Ordinary walls might suddenly display unblinking eyes staring back at you, for example. It's just the way it is. There's no point trying to interpret it. But in the middle of this isolated, bizarre experience, you experience the infamous Gray Man. This featureless figure in a trench coat appears randomly throughout dreams, silently pursuing you. He has no walking animation, he just floats towards you, getting closer without ever speeding up. You can't fight him, you can only flee until he inevitably catches you, ending your current dream. In a way, this is not a dream simulator, but a nightmare simulator, especially if or when you arrive in the Violence District. This area is the game at its most disturbing. It's a permanent nighttime area featuring corpses, crashed vehicles, and ghost-like entities. If the walls suddenly transform, they reveal horrific scenes like a body hanging from the ceiling. All this disturbing imagery appears without context or explanation, leaving you to question what twisted part of the subconscious you've stumbled into. When the game ends, it's really up to you to make sense of whatever you just witnessed. Corpse Factory. Corpse Factory is set in a seriously messed up vision of near-future Tokyo where technology enables humanity's darkest impulses. Corpse Girl's website allows users to anonymously request the elimination of someone they know. All that's required is uploading a photo of the intended victim. Those targeted receive a photograph of their own lifeless body with a timestamp predicting their death within days or even hours. At first, most dismiss it as an urban legend, a creepy internet hoax for late-night discussions. But then bodies begin appearing across Tokyo, each victim possessed one of those strange photos of their own corpse received shortly before their fate was sealed. The story follows Noriko Kurosawa, a seemingly normal bank data entry temp with a secret identity. She is Corpse Girl herself, the creator of the website. Soon, her mental state deteriorates as she operates this digital death factory, taking twisted pleasure in orchestrating elaborate endings for strangers at the request of anonymous users. All of this is messed up enough, but the game is obviously intended to mirror our own relationship with technology. The website creates a disconnect between actions and consequences as users request deaths without ever getting their hands dirty, hiding behind digital anonymity while inflicting real-world harm. Basically, it's exactly the same reason people feel so emboldened online to troll, threaten, and harm. By removing the human element from our interactions, we don't think about the humans on the other side. The game explores these themes of dehumanization in the digital age. Users of Corpse Girl's website see their victims as mere photos on a screen, not as people with lives and feelings. The cold interface of technology makes it easier to objectify others, just like real life. Of course, this website doesn't exist in reality, thankfully, but the game is trying to show us how the internet can amplify all of our existing social problems by providing tools that distance these harmers from the human impact of their actions. That's disturbingly realistic. Blank Dream. Blank Dream begins with Michiro Usui, a 17-year-old girl who faced relentless bullying, making the fatal decision to end her existence by throwing herself into a lake. But rather than finding the peace she expected, she awakens in the mirror world, a disturbing liminal space that exists between life and death. Upon arriving in this unsettling new world, Michiro discovers she's lost her memories. Her reflection instructs her to find and break mirrors scattered throughout this world to regain fragments of her past. The only problem is that to break each mirror, Michiro must terminate her existence again within each memory, stabbing herself, drowning, electrocution, repeatedly experiencing the trauma of her own demise. In death, everything is far, far more painful than when she was alive. The mirror world itself is divided into realms with names like the Realm of Blood, the Realm of Spirits, the Realm of Death. None of them sounds anything but nightmarish, but these spaces embody classic liminal aesthetics. Empty corridors, abandoned schools, and transitional spaces devoid of other living beings, creating an uncanny valley effect that makes players instinctively uneasy. You cannot help but be extremely uncomfortable. As Michiro recovers her memories, the game reveals increasingly disturbing elements of her life. We learn about familial pressure, constant ridicule from peers, and psychological torment that slowly eroded her will to live. The game doesn't shy away from depicting the horrific impact of bullying, how words can inflict wounds deeper than physical harm. In fact, it's what the whole thing is all about. The genius of Blank Dream's horror lies in its contrast of the game's seemingly innocent visual style with deeply traumatic themes. Jump scares are included throughout, but the true dread comes from the gradual revelation of Michiro's past. Players experience her isolation firsthand as they navigate hostile environments where danger lurks around every corner. Two other lost souls inhabit this purgatory alongside Michiro, each with their own tragic backstories and mirrors to break. It's clear that this world traps those who have experienced extreme suffering. Death doesn't free anybody from their pain, it just thrusts them into a far, far worse experience. Mishiro's original wish wasn't just to die, but to erase herself completely from existence, as if her life had never happened at all. Instead, she thrust herself into a never-ending world of pain, misery, and extreme trauma. Level 4. Tokyo Necro. Tokyo Necro is set in an ice-covered metropolis where necromancy, that's the forbidden art of reanimating the lifeless, is alive and well, in darkness. Within this frozen wasteland, investigators Ethica and Kogi pursue cases involving those who manipulated the dead. And players absolutely get what they came for, as the game doesn't filter its visuals whatsoever. Necromancers use their craft for personal satisfaction, for lack of a better word, and the player has no choice but to watch these intimate violations with the revived bodies because they're shown in extended sequences where the player becomes an uncomfortable witness. The whole time this is going on, there are figures observing and documenting the entire thing and deriving their own pleasure from the suffering of the revived. As for us, the player, the story forces us to take on various roles, sometimes placing us as the ones who are truly harming these innocent revived victims. Our so-called heroes resort to questionable methods against antagonists, justifying the behaviors they once condemned. The whole story really is just one giant ethical test. The city is full of characters who delight in causing pain, many of them seeking out the innocent and untouched. Those victims end up being corrupted by their trauma, becoming the very monster that took their innocence in the first place. The city is cyclical. Victims become monsters who create new victims, and so on. The whole game presents these acts as totally normal in this city. Characters casually reference vile acts during everyday conversations, and every choice the player makes, even for something as seemingly harmless as dialogue choice, just dirties their hands even more. You cannot emerge from this game unscathed. Siren, Forbidden Siren. The town of Haneda exists between worlds, trapped in a perpetual nightmare. But it's also the setting of Siren. In this weird Japanese village, an interrupted ritual totally tears reality apart, transforming the isolated community into an island surrounded by a crimson sea. We know that everything feels wrong from the first moment. Water turns blood red, time folds in on itself, and villagers become something else entirely. This is not a normal, average village. But then the game introduces a new unsettling feature, sightjacking. You can literally see through the eyes of the creatures hunting you. You can see how their vision pulses with their weird, unnatural rhythms. Sometimes you'll even watch yourself through their gaze, standing vulnerable as they approach. You become both predator and prey simultaneously. A very weird and uncomfortable situation to be in. Especially because these hunters, the Shibito, aren't typical horror enemies. They bleed constantly from their eyes, making them look horrific. They perform mundane tasks like sweeping or fishing despite their transformation. So a shopkeeper will continue manning his store, or a policeman patrolling his beat. They hum and whistle while searching for survivors. It's as if they're totally normal, but we know they're not. As the game progresses, the Shibito evolves. Some develop insect traits like spider-like movements or fly appendages. Others control their prey like hive nodes. The maggot Shibito, with its elongated body and thin arms, can eliminate you instantly in a really disgusting way. 10 playable characters navigate this horrific landscape across a fractured 3-day time span. Actions in one segment affect another character hours later, and you won't know until that happens. You might place an item that someone else will need later, creating a complex web of causality that might help you or it might harm you. Either way, the environment itself remembers your choices. Through all of this, the local priest Hisako Yao leads a cult trying to resurrect the sacred being through ritual sacrifice. You literally have to die for them to be happy. Welcome to Haneda. Kuon. In 2004, From Software released a new PlayStation 2 title named Kuon, which presented a new take on Japanese history. Set during Japan's Heian period, the game takes place within the confines of Fujiwara Manor in Kyoto, where something has gone terribly wrong. The game draws heavily from kaidan, traditional Japanese ghost stories, to create an atmosphere that feels authentically disturbing in ways Western horror often fails to achieve. The narrative revolves around a forbidden ritual involving magical silkworms from sacred mulberry trees. These creatures can resurrect the dead by cocooning bodies, but each resurrection requires a series of increasingly disturbing sacrifices. The Kuon ritual involves performing this resurrection 9 times, with each one demanding more human suffering. Players play as 2 main characters, Utsuki, daughter of the Omyoji Ashiya Doman, and Sakia, Doman's apprentice. Each provides a different perspective on the same events, with a third hidden scenario unlocked upon completing both. Part of the reason the game isn't so well known today is because of its gameplay. The characters are exceptionally slow to move, the combat is imprecise and messy, and the fixed camera angles create blind spots where danger might lurk. All of that becomes very frustrating and scary when confronting Gaki, hungry ghosts from Buddhist cosmology, eternally suffering from insatiable hunger. The more you play the game, the more you begin to notice the eerie twin children singing throughout the manor, hinting at some pretty terrible fates. Or you discover wicker chests containing silk cocoons with malformed bodies, which obviously exposes the disturbing truth behind Doman's experiments. Every turn in the game, something reveals itself to you, and it's never good, but it always feels real. The game's mythology crafts horrors from real Buddhist and Shinto concepts, making the supernatural elements feel grounded despite their fantastical nature. The authenticity actually makes the whole thing even more intense. Stigmatized property. Stigmatized property is not your typical Japanese horror game. This one delves into the eerie concept of jikobuken, Japanese apartments with disturbing histories that rent for suspiciously low prices. Of course, they're a lot more sinister than just that. You play as a young woman visiting her boyfriend's new apartment, only to discover he's nowhere to be found. Now, the place itself seems normal enough. It's a decent-sized unit with modern furnishings, remarkably affordable, especially for a student. Too affordable, really. But your first clue something's wrong comes when you look in the mirror, and your reflection doesn't appear. From that moment on, you're tasked with finding 7 torn diary pages scattered throughout the property. Each discovery peels back another layer of the mystery. The entries start pretty mundane, detailing a student excited about their first apartment, parents visiting, meeting neighbors, yada yada. But gradually, things take a dark turn. The building's other residents behave strangely. The doors open when they shouldn't. You start seeing shadows moving. All of this is uniquely environmental storytelling. Rather than relying on cheap scares, the game builds psychological tension through suggestion and implication through the environment. We all know something happened here, but what exactly? The game forces you to piece that together yourself. As you collect more pages, the building reveals its true nature. Previous tenants disappeared entirely, while others became part of the property itself. That's the key, really. The apartment doesn't just house people, it consumes them. Your choices determine whether you escape or join the apartment's collection of lost souls. The game offers 2 endings, neither particularly comforting. No matter which ending you get, the truth remains. A home is designed to protect, it should never consume. This one, however, digests, whether you want it to or not. Akamanto. When the game begins, Akamanto traps players in a creepy abandoned Japanese school with no way to escape from whatever lurks within. From that moment, players are deeply unnerved by the deliberately dated PlayStation 1 era graphics, these weird low-resolution textures that warp and distort with camera movement, creating a unique sense of distortion. These aesthetic choices aren't for nostalgic reasons. They're designed to heighten the sense of isolation and dread as you navigate the dimly lit hallways and deserted classrooms. And one wrong move? Done. That's what truly elevates the horror. The game's unforgiving permadeath system. One wrong move means a complete restart, turning each creaking floorboard and distant sound into a potential game-ending threat. That constant tension totally alters how players navigate the environment, with each decision becoming a calculated risk. The story at the heart of the game centers on the Japanese urban legend of Akamanto, a vengeful spirit in a red cloak who haunts bathroom stalls. But here, the game transforms the folklore into a relentless hunter. When Akamanto appears, it announces itself through disturbing audio distortions and Japanese text flooding the screen before unleashing its horrifying, never-ending scream as it pursues you. It's horrifying. In case you have any doubt about how psychologically terrifying the game is, just look at the reaction of Let's Players.
Oh, no! What? Get me out of here, please! Oh, I'm going downtown, baby! Oh, I hate that noise!
That's genuine terror captured on camera as streamers encounter the red-cloaked figure for the first time. Players must navigate this nightmare while solving intricate puzzles tied to Japanese culture. The game forces you to collect colored papers, interact with mysterious wells, and confront the entity that hunts you at every turn. The backstory gradually unfolds through discovered tape recordings, revealing the dark tale of bullying behind the entity's creation, until eventually the game leaves players with a deep unease. The terror might not even be over. Who knows? Shadow Corridor. Shadow Corridor begins with a player character being drawn to a mysterious alleyway only to be transported to an alternate dimension through a mirror. But from there, every experience is brand new. The player can replay the game over and over, and every single time the dungeons are randomly generated, bringing an ever-changing experience with each playthrough. The only thing that stays the same is the darkness. Armed with nothing but a lighter or occasional flashlight, you have to navigate your way through pitch-black hallways with nothing but the sound of your footsteps. Oh, and also there are random aggressive spirits that jump out at you now and then, just to make sure you stay awake. All of these supernatural enemies are rooted in Japanese folklore, specifically evil spirits driven by cursed no-masks. These entities hunt you relentlessly, some reacting to light, others to sound, forcing you to adapt constantly. With no weapons to defend yourself, your only options are to hide or run. A single touch from these apparitions means game over. Now you have to start over with no idea of where you are. Shadow Corridor is deeply committed to atmospheric horror rather than cheap scares, although there are those too. Even outdoor areas somehow feel suffocating. That random generation ensures you're never comfortable. Each new corridor potentially hides a bell-ringing shrine maiden spirit or another horrific entity. You can never be sure. The game story gradually unfolds through scattered notes and documents that explain why these apparitions haunt you. Blood-covered walls and disturbing notes detailing violent histories contribute to an overwhelmingly oppressive atmosphere. The whole thing is just brutal, bleak, and truly feels like you might never make your way out. Level 5. Kimi to kanojo to kanojo no koi, tonoto. Kimi to kanojo no koi begins with a protagonist named Shinichi, his childhood friend Miyuki, and a mysterious new girl named Ai. The game initially presents itself as a typical romance story with players choosing between two love interests. Easy enough, right? But Ai immediately stands out with her peculiar behavior. She speaks about reality as if it's a game, repeatedly making references to saving and reloading, and claims she can talk to God through her cell phone. She looks strangely similar to a character from a fictional game within the game's universe. The first playthrough leads players down Miyuki's route to a typically romantic ending with Miyuki and Shinichi getting together. Yet when starting a new game to pursue Aoi, strange things begin to happen. Miyuki makes unsettling comments suggesting she remembers previous playthroughs. Things like, "Just like last time, right?" and "Love lasts forever." When you eventually get to Aoi's route, you uncover the game's true nature. Aoi is revealed as an entity created by God who must collect intimate encounters to continue existing. During an encounter with Aoi and another character, the game reveals Miyuki was hiding beneath the bed the entire time, watching everything with growing rage and jealousy. What follows is something you could never expect. Armed with a baseball bat, Miyuki Aoi's cat, then Aoi herself, and finally attacks Shinichi. As his vision fades, Aoi continues speaking into her phone to God.
もしもし、神様。私の記憶をセーブして、そろそろ始めましょう。
Suddenly, Miyuki looks directly at the camera, breaking the fourth wall completely. "I'm talking to you," she says, as in, us. You see, she's become self-aware, revealing her anger isn't at Shinichi's betrayal, but at you, the player, for abandoning her route to pursue Aoi after promising eternal love. The game crashes to desktop, restarting with a different interface designed by Miyuki, and deletes all save files from your computer. You're trapped in Miyuki's world now, forced to reckon with a character who's transcended her programming and developed an obsessive attachment to the person behind the screen, you. It's actually an insane twist that makes your investment in the game feel much, much more intense. Walk. Sanpo. Walk instantly takes you to an empty Japanese street at dusk. You're playing as a young protagonist in a school uniform, desperately trying to reach home before nightfall. A simple quest made much harder when a tall, crow-like entity with an uncomfortably wide white grin begins stalking you from the shadows. But even before the danger appears, you're uneasy. The low-resolution textures blur boundaries between interactive and non-interactive elements. Fixed camera angles deliberately limit your vision, forcing blind forward movement without any idea of where you're actually going. Even the sound design is built to freak you out as footsteps echo in silence, crows caw ominously overhead, and sometimes a fish inexplicably falls from the sky. Throughout all of this, you start to notice the bizarre blend of real-world photographs with digital elements. Backgrounds use actual Japanese street photography processed to resemble degraded VHS footage, but the character models are jagged, low-poly constructs. Suddenly, you have a weird combination of real locations that look kind of real and characters that just look fake. It makes the crow entity stand out even more, as if it's somehow invading this bizarre dimension. The core mechanic centers on stealth. You collect yen to purchase a key from a vending machine while avoiding the creature's gaze, but if you get spotted, you must hide or face a pretty horrifying game over sequence where the entity catches you. Your controller vibrates when danger approaches, adding physical tension to the horror. You can't even see the creature half the time. You feel it approaching. That's where the game is most powerful, when it's suggesting that something is not quite right. The creature's power lies in the fact that it's always there, even when you cannot see it. There's no safety on the streets. They just keep looping, making you increasingly anxious that you will never actually find your way home. Eventually, thankfully, you make it there. Or, at least, you reach what appears to be home. The television flickers, displaying a bizarre cryptic text, "My voice coursing through your fingertips." Suddenly, the controller starts to vibrate. Some very smart people discover that the vibrations were in Morse code, spelling out Channel 2. That's the game telling you that it's watching, and it has been watching you the entire time you've been playing. Battle 2. Battle 2, the game, was released in April 2005 by Illusionsoft, the same company behind multiple other notorious titles featuring non-consensual intimate activities. Despite its provocative name, the sequel actually removed the forced acts present in the original game, instead focusing more heavily on its fighting mechanics. The game positions itself as a 3D weapons-based fighting title where players control various characters in combat. But they need to have something related to that title, right? The game's core mechanic is the ability to remove female opponents' clothing as they take damage during fights. Every character has unlimited guard capabilities, special moves that cannot be blocked, and a variety of alternative clothing items that can be unlocked. But it's what happens after combat that reveals the game's truly troubling nature. When a player defeats a female character, the unconscious woman lies before them, and the player must heal her wounds in what the game calls a special mode. But, as you already know, this healing process is a thinly veiled excuse for non-consensual physical contact with an unconscious character. The game includes a story mode following a swordsman named Yuki who travels an island fighting enemies. Players choose a female companion who accompanies them throughout the journey, culminating in a predictably intimate encounter at the conclusion. The Extras mode allows players to interact with injured characters, and the Replay mode enables intimate activities with any female character the player has completed the storyline with. Basically, the whole game is just a sad excuse to get intimate with female characters who clearly don't want it. Battle 2's notoriety isn't just about its content, but its connection to the first game, which featured even more explicit forced encounters. The game was criticized by publications like Something Awful, with one writer commenting on the irony of removing the forced elements from a game with such an explicit title. The game remains banned on streaming platforms like Twitch and stands as an example of gaming content that crosses serious ethical boundaries. Its mechanics deliberately objectify female characters, presenting their bodies as rewards for player progress, while discussing deeply problematic interactions as healing or helping unconscious figures. It might not be as extreme as the first game, but it's not much better. Level 6. Night Shift Nurses, Yakin Byoto. Night Shift Nurses represents one of the most controversial visual novels ever released in the Western market. The game centers around Ryuji Hirasaka, a disgraced doctor with what the game describes as severe personality issues. Understatement. The premise itself signals some immediate concern. Hirasaka receives an unexpected job offer at St. Juliana Hospital from Narumi Jinguji, a woman he had previously victimized through non-consensual activities. The story unfolds as Narumi suggests Hirasaka help her transform the hospital into the world's most corrupt hospital ward. Her goal involves having Hirasaka experiment on the nursing staff to create what she believes would be ideal employees for wealthy clients. From there, the game explicitly depicts instances of degradation and violation. The protagonist's inner thoughts consistently reveal misogynistic perspectives, viewing women exclusively as objects for experimentation and personal use. Every interaction follows this pattern. Nurses who show kindness to patients are targeted for correction. Shy staff members who don't immediately respond to advances are labeled as needing to be taught lessons. Every single woman exists only to be an opportunity. When the title came to America, it was released in a heavily censored version, the distributor citing legal concerns about potential violations of anti-obscenity laws in major U.S. cities. The company later released an uncensored version due to consumer demand, risking those potential legal consequences with no fear. But it immediately became notorious for its graphic content. So infamous, in fact, that it's now considered one of the most extreme examples of problematic content in Japanese visual novels. The American release removed certain bodily fluid scenes that were deemed beyond acceptable boundaries even for adult content. We can't even talk about them in this video. In 2024, a version appeared on Steam that removed explicit content but retained the disturbing narrative structure. But this version was criticized for eliminating graphic scenes while maintaining the deeply troubling storyline, so they were angry about the scenes and angry about the scenes being removed. Makes sense, right? Mad Father. In 2012, Japanese developer Sen released Mad Father, a survival horror puzzle game set in the twisted world of the Drevis family mansion. The game follows 11-year-old Aya Drevis, who lives in an isolated mansion in northern Germany with her father Alfred, a doctor who conducts mysterious research in the basement, and their assistant Maria. Even though she's young, Aya is aware of her father's dark activity. She hears screams from below and knows he takes people for his experiments. But she's simply accepted that as what it is, part of her general life. On the anniversary of her mother's passing, Aya wakes up at midnight to find the mansion overrun by animated corpses. All of the former test subjects of her father are seeking vengeance, forcing her to navigate puzzles to evade dangers to uncover the truth. At every turn, the game introduces us to the dolls. It turns out Alfred Drevis doesn't just experiment on humans. He's transforming them into lifelike dolls through taxidermy, a pretty brutal attack on our humanity. Eventually, Aya discovers her father intended to transform her into a doll as well. She learns he killed her mother when Monica discovered his plans for their daughter. Because all of this is in the family line, with Alfred beginning his obsession after taking the life of his own mother, becoming fixated with preserving human beauty through death. In the remake's additional content, Aya herself harbors dark tendencies inherited not from her father, but from her mother's bloodline. Monica deliberately married Alfred, a known killer, to create the perfect successor to her family's demonic legacy. In fact, the game's multiple endings offer no true escape from horror. Each one just reveals new layers of the family's twisted psychology, suggesting the cycle of depravity continues regardless of which path Aya takes. It's inevitable that she will end this way. Level 7. Corpse Party. Corpse Party begins with high school students performing the Sachiko Ever After charm intended to bind them as eternal friends. But when the ritual is performed incorrectly, the floor collapses beneath them, transporting each to separate dimensions of the abandoned school. The genius of Corpse Party lies in how it deliberately isolates everybody. Characters find themselves alone or in small groups, wandering hallways littered with decomposing bodies and bloodstains. Communication between dimensions proves totally impossible, leaving players feeling helpless as they navigate the school's shifting architecture. Now, yes, the 16-bit graphics feature adorable big-eyed character sprites that seem plucked from a cheerful RPG. But this visual innocence shatters when these same cute characters meet horrific ends. They're crushed by falling debris, dismembered by vengeful spirits, or driven to self-destructive acts by the school's malevolent influence. Every death serves a purpose, establishing the stakes. That's it. Characters die permanently. No resurrections, no second chances. Each loss just builds the growing sense that escape might be impossible. The gameplay offers no combat options. All you can do is desperately evade and hide from supernatural entities that can end their journey instantly. Because wrong choices lead to wrong ends, detailed gruesome conclusions showing exactly what happens when you fail. These aren't simple game over screens, but elaborately crafted scenarios designed to horrify you. The game is designed to look cute, but it's built to surprise and horrify you to create an atmosphere of absolute hopelessness. Splatterhouse, 1988. In 1988, Splatterhouse burst onto the arcade scene, becoming notorious as the first video game to ever carry a parental warning label, a full 4 years before Mortal Kombat would follow suit. This beat-em-up introduced players to Rick Taylor, a parapsychology student who, along with his girlfriend Jennifer, sought shelter from a storm in the ominous West Mansion. After being knocked unconscious, Rick awakens to find himself transformed by the supernatural Terror Mask, a Mayan artifact that fuses with his body and grants him unusually superhuman strength. Jennifer has vanished, and Rick must battle through hordes of grotesque creatures in a desperate attempt to save her. What truly sets Splatterhouse apart from other arcade games was its unflinching embrace of horror imagery. Players witnessed Jennifer transform into a fanged monster that Rick was forced to eliminate. The fourth level featured a boss called Evil Cross, a disturbing arrangement of severed heads orbiting an upside-down cross. All of this imagery proved too extreme for 1980s America, leading to the game being banned from most mainstream arcades. Over time, it gradually disappeared from public view, relegated to pizza shops and out-of-the-way locations. The TurboGrafx-16 home version boldly emphasized its controversial nature with box art featuring a mock parental advisory. The horrifying theme of this game may be inappropriate for young children and cowards. The controversy was actually the whole point. The game had taken heavy inspiration from horror films like Friday the 13th and Evil Dead 2, trying to create a creepy, bloody, horrifying atmosphere. Soon enough, the game's unprecedented graphic content sparked a heated debate years before government hearings on video game violence began. Splatterhouse went on to spawn multiple sequels and a 2010 reboot, cementing its legacy as the title that pushed boundaries in the arcade world. If you're still in the mood for some high-quality gaming icebergs, why not check out this video on the most disturbing banned video game?